You know, one of the reasons that I talk about crime on this channel is not just because I'm interested in it, is not just because it drives the clicks, it drives the views, because oftentimes stories that I'm really passionate about just don't seem to do so. It's because a lot of the crime that we're seeing in major cities across this nation can be directly attributed to policy failures, politicians who refuse to do their job, and things that can actually be changed if we decide this is not the direction we want to go in. But I have to be perfectly honest, doing this format on this channel for so long has sapped my hope in certain locations across this country. Now, I'm not completely black-pilled, as the kids on the internet.com will say. I'm not somebody who just says every left-wing city is completely lost, because the numbers just don't bear that out. But a perfect example of a city that just seems to be completely lost is the city of Chicago. Recently, we have seen an uptick in armed robberies done by armed robbery crews, and it is so ridiculous and absurd that even news outlets covering the armed robberies are not safe from these criminals. And Brandon Johnson, the mayor that they replaced, the ousted Lori Lightfoot, who was ousted for being soft on crime, of course, is an even more soft on crime mayor, is somebody who is all for defunding the police, and is someone who should never be in office ever at any level for any place in this country. But to make matters worse, even if Brandon Johnson were not elected, even if they actually elected the good mayoral candidate that was running opposed to him, they still have Kimberly Fox at the Cook County District Attorney's Office not prosecuting anyone. So Chicago is an absolute hellscape, and the numbers reflect that. Homicides in Chicago are at 25-year highs. They started spiking dramatically even from that elevated point when Brandon Johnson took office. All these different crimes are at decades highs, and they all seem to be spiking alongside of it, and that spike coincides even further with the election of Brandon Johnson. So there's really nothing to cheer for, nothing to hope for, and that is quite depressing. But before I depress you, this video is sponsored, so let me toss it to the sponsor, then I'll bring it back over here and we'll talk about it on the other side. Ever wonder how seemingly overnight this channel transitioned from a maybe 2-3 times a week kind of YouTube channel to posting basically daily? Well, I'll let you in on a little bit of a secret. I actually have been cheating. Now, I used to use the traditional ways that you're all familiar with. You wake up, you have coffee, you drink it a bunch, you use that caffeine energy in order to operate and do your job in a semi-productive way. Then I'd crash at night, get horrible sleep, wake up, do the same thing. However, now what I like to use is C60 Evo. This amazing formulation, which comes in a variety of different things, can help me boost my energy naturally. Now, my favorite product from C60 Evo still is this olive oil energy supplement. It actually gives me the energy throughout the day from just a teaspoon a day, and guess what? It doesn't disrupt my sleep. And the great thing about C60 Evo is that it's all organic. It's all good stuff, pure ingredients, and they have a variety of different products, including anti-aging products, to help you get through the day. On top of that, you can support this channel by supporting C60 Evo. If you go to c60evo.com/AJW and use promo code AJW, not only will you receive a discount, but on top of that, you'll be supporting me and boosting your energy. Check out their products. They have some amazing anti-aging facial stuff. I definitely recommend 1 drop a day on the skin, restores that youthful glow. That is c60evo.com/AJW. Use promo code AJW.
Well, police believe there are multiple robbery crews targeting victims on the west side. One of those crews was caught last night, but after those arrests were made, another group was at it, hitting victims in 10 separate locations in a matter of 2 hours.
So, of course, one of the most outrageous things about this is just the premise, the promise of the premise. This idea that the city of Chicago, their police department, actually made an arrest of a robbery crew that was on one of these spree robberies, and while they're processing that robbery crew, guess what? Another one is acting, committing 10 armed robberies in a matter of 2 hours, also in the same area, because That's where Chicago is right now.
Sí, me robaron a mí, me quitaron $2,000.
A mechanic at Illinois Auto Repair on North St. Louis and Logan Square says it happened in seconds. A dark-colored sedan pulled up just before 7:30 Saturday night, and 4 armed men with hoods up wearing masks jump out, taking his wallet at gunpoint that had $2,000 cash a customer had just paid him inside.
So as you can see, these criminals operate rather quickly. They pull up to this mechanic shop. There are 3 people standing out in front. Unfortunately, one of these mechanics actually was just paid $2,000 for a job that he just completed, and the robbers were able to get that. They also often take cell phones and other things that people have in their wallets that are of value, jewelry, watches, etc. And this is a common occurrence in the city of Chicago, so common that, again, as the police arrested one of these armed robbery crews, as they finally caught one of them, another one was on a robbery spree simultaneously.
No, nunca pensé que me fuera a tocar a mí.
He says he never thought it would happen to him, but this man is just one of more than a dozen people robbed in a 2-day time span on the west side.
It sounds like that's been happening a lot lately. It's definitely scary.
Victims described between 2 to 5 armed offenders. In several of the incidents, they were seen fleeing in a white sedan, one victim describing it as a Kia.
Now, this is an absolutely crucial part of this story, that they were fleeing in a Kia, because as we talked about on this channel, in multiple cities in this country, Kias are being stolen at an alarming clip. Now, this is due in large part to that TikTok challenge that revealed that Kias that have the key for entry are actually incredibly easy to start with, I think, the back of a USB cord, and considering most people carry their charger around with them, this has inspired a lot of people to steal Kias in particular. But that also should help you understand that not only are these armed robbers, who by the way often hurt and or shoot and or kill people, committing armed robbery, but they're also carjacking some poor person that is somebody who likely needs that Kia in order to get to work, in order to go on these crime sprees, so they can hide behind the ambiguity of a car that is not tied to any of the individual thieves. So what we're actually watching is combinations of criminality coming together in the city of Chicago. Now, Brandon Johnson, like many of these left-wing mayors, has actually proposed suing Kia, the automobile company, and to be clear, Kia and Hyundai should have some responsibility for this manufacturing defect and the problems that it has caused for the owners of their vehicle. However, and this is incredibly crucial, Kia and Hyundai, these are Korean car companies. This manufacturing glitch is something that is available in their models not only nationwide in the United States of America, but worldwide with a great number of these models. But the thing is, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, it's only in places like Chicago, Milwaukee, Houston, Baltimore that we're seeing this 10x increase in auto thefts, specifically targeting Kias. It's only in American cities that already have crime problems, soft on crime problems, soft on juvenile offender laws being passed, and all these other things that have led to these dramatic spikes in the crime rate and in the theft rate of the Kia. So the Kia challenge is definitely real. Kia and Hyundai definitely failed in protecting their customers from theft, but the thing is, blaming them for the actions of people that you refuse to prosecute, thus you incentivize in order to steal these vehicles, in order to commit these other crimes, is not really going to solve that problem. Remember, I just did a video, just released it on this channel the other day about a thief in Baltimore, 11 years old, that had been arrested but had to be released directly to the custody of the parents without charges due to a Maryland state law for stealing cars 13 times. 13 times this individual stole a car, but because you actually cannot prosecute somebody of that age in the state of Maryland, they were released over and over and over again. One specific instance that should stick out and should be incredibly alarming is the fact that he was released for one auto theft, then 4 hours later was driving and fleeing police in another car after committing another additional auto theft. This is a problem in terms of criminal justice policy, and blaming the companies is nowhere near the solution that we need. We need to actually prosecute prosecute people for Grand Theft Auto. I know this sounds crazy to all you sane, normal people out there who think, why would you ever go soft on Grand Theft Auto? But for some reason, this needs to be told to Brandon Johnson and all these woke officials across this country.
Just overnight, a crew committed 10 armed robberies, the first just before 3:30 this morning in the 4400 block of West 5th. The offenders hit victims on West Grand, South Campbell, Southwestern, West Cermak, South Allport, West Lake, North Ashland, and West Grenshaw. In some cases, the victims were assaulted as well.
Now, we've seen a bunch of stories, and I've covered a bunch of stories on this channel where we talk about maps like this, where the criminals are just running wild, basically going unchallenged, offending time and time again, over and over and over again, and there seems to be no mechanism in order to stop them. And now, I will also add, there is another additional policy that is tied to the city of Chicago that allows these criminals to run wild, and oftentimes it impacts these specific instances, and that is do not pursue policies. These individuals steal cars, they drive like maniacs, and the police are required to get permission from their supervisors in order to pursue these people because they've decided that it is more risky to engage in a pursuit than to let the people go. But the thing is, this is 10 armed robberies. If you were the police and you could have stopped them after 3, but you didn't get permission to pursue these criminals, that is 7 other people or 7 sets of victims, because oftentimes, like the first video that I showed you, there are more than one victim in these robberies that have had guns pointed at them, that have rabid criminals that are all hopped up on this energy that they're not going to get caught and they're entitled to everything, and a bunch of potential deadly conflicts. All of this is being maximized by the city of Chicago and their ridiculous policies that hamstring police and prevent them from being able to do their job. And even when they do make an arrest, even when they actually do step it up and maybe be able to crack down on these criminals, Kimberly Fox is releasing them, Brandon Johnson is defending them, crying over them, talking about how they just need more midnight basketball, and how these criminals are just innocent angel-like Aladdins that are pointing guns at people's faces, threatening to murder them, sometimes murdering them for the contents of their wallet. Shouldn't we feel so sad for the people that would kill you for the petty cash that you have in your wallet, rather than, actually address the problem of criminality in the city of Chicago? We can't do that because guess what? That would be a bit racialist. What's wrong with you, you white supremacists? How dare you? Don't call these criminals, because honestly, they just need good paying jobs. If these guys were making solar panels, do you think they would be out there robbing these people? Absolutely not.
It is a real shame that it's happening. I do wish that there would be less of this, naturally.
I'm very big on meeting people where they're at. I'm very big on when you find people in liberal cities that are victimized by crimes or who are concerned about crimes, telling them specifically what went wrong in terms of policy in their city, what elected officials are holding back the police and preventing crime from being driven down in order to find an adequate solution. But this guy right here, I'm not about it. This guy right here, his tone and tenor, I'm not interested in it. He's like, well, obviously I would prefer if less of this happened. I wish we could live in a world with less criminality. Well, I got news for you. You can. Stop voting for Brandon Johnson. Stop supporting these politicians. Stop voting for Kimberly Fox. Stop being convinced that these soft on crime people are fighting systemic racism and battling the legacy of slavery, because what they're actually doing is unleashing criminals onto the streets and victimizing more and more people, all based on their warped ideology that paints the people pointing the guns at the hardworking people as the victims rather than the actual victims.
I do wish that there would be less of this.
Oh yeah, I don't want to hear about how you wish this wasn't happening, how you wish this would happen less. There are policies in place. There are politicians that you could have elected that would have ensured that this happened less. The crime is spiking due to the fact that you installed these people in the first place. If you actually empowered your police to do something about it, if you actually got rid of these do not chase policies, you would be shocked at how many more people the police can catch when they can actually chase them. You would be shocked about how few crimes are actually being committed, and the district attorney is actually prosecuting the repeat offenders. It's amazing how it works when somebody is committing crime after crime after crime, and then they're moved from the streets where they're committing crime after crime after crime to a jail, to a prison, how much crime they're not committing in the society while they're in prison. It's called incapacitation. We figured this out decades ago, so maybe stop wishing for a better Chicago and start voting for it, start advocating for it, start pressing for it, because guess what? You're the author of your own peril. This idea that there's nothing that you can do, that it's just innocent Aladdins, that it's harsh times and all of that, that is exactly what led Chicago to the state that it's in. That is exactly why when the police finally get rid of one of these armed robbery crews, another armed robbery crew is committing crimes in the very same area.
Chicago police did arrest 3 people around 9:30 last night after an armed robbery led to a crash in Bucktown. The suspects were in a white SUV and had just robbed a 51-year-old woman in the 2000 block of Mozart before crashing. That vehicle is possibly connected to multiple robberies over the weekend, including the one at the auto repair shop.
So I just want to point out that likely the only reason these criminals were caught was because they got into a car crash. But for that, the do not pursue policy likely would have protected them. And remember what the purpose of the do not pursue policy is. The purpose of these policies is that allegedly it's more dangerous to pursue these criminals because they might crash than it is to leave them alone and let them stick guns in more and more people's faces, rob them, shoot them, and all that, because God forbid we ever cause a car crash with these criminals behind the wheel. Well, the thing is, when they're driving so erratically to commit these crimes, it turns out they also get into car crashes. They also create that very same damage. The only difference is that instead of crashing after robbing one person and being sent up the river to a prison for a long period of time, they crash after they do 14 robberies, 20 robberies, 100 robberies, because you're not pursuing the criminal.
There's a lot of frustration because I know that the mayor's talking about, investing in the community, looking at the root cause of violence, which my community supports.
Again, there absolutely is no hope at all whatsoever with politicians like this. He's like, the mayor's talking about investing in the community and looking at the root cause of violence. Let me explain this to you in as clear terms as possible. Government spending is not investment. If you want investment in the community, you have to drive down the criminality. Think about it very logically. If you are going to invest your money into an area, into a storefront, would you pick an area where looting of the store is common practice? Would you pick an area where pulling up to your business location likely is going to result in somebody hopping out of a car, pointing a gun in your face, in your employee's face, maybe shooting and killing them? Or would you go for a better part of town where these problems are not happening? You can't have investment unless you drive down the crime. So having soft on crime while promising investments is a fool's errand. It's never going to work. We got $1 trillion war on poverty evidence to show that this doesn't work. And guess what? That war on poverty coincides with the greatest crime increase in American history. Look at the charts. So this government spending, this welfareism, not going to work. On top of that, this idea that root causes, that saying root cause is so special, so important, and all of that is just another fool's errand. Root causes are not more important than any other cause, and identifying a root cause properly, which by the way, none of these people are capable of doing, does not mean that that root cause is the most efficient way to address the problem. Perfect example of this. We know that the root cause of earthquakes is shifting tectonic plates beneath the Earth's surface. Now, if you were given $10 billion in order to deal with earthquakes, how would you spend that money? Would you spend all $10 billion on the root cause, trying to control tectonic plates, or would you realize that that is a root cause that there's nothing you can do about and it's not efficient for you to try to address that? Instead, it makes way more sense to address the symptoms, which of course are collapsing buildings, by spending that money on earthquake proofing. So if they say the root cause is systemic systems, systemic structures, and we need to spend it on midnight basketball because maybe down the line that's going to lead to something that's going to prevent criminality, guess what? That's a fool's errand. What you should do is actually arrest these people, address the problem in the most direct and efficient way possible, because that will solve the issue. On top of that, going after poverty, arresting poverty, which they claim is the root cause, is not going to deal with the criminals who are making robberies happen today. It's not going to deal with the murderers that are out there on the streets today. It doesn't address the gang violence that's happening today. You're not going to have these leaders of criminal enterprises go off and get jobs installing solar panels if they're already entrenched in the criminal lifestyle. You got to get them off the streets, and then maybe you'd be surprised about how interested people are in investing in the city of Chicago when they don't have to worry about their storefronts being looted constantly and there being no consequences for that crime.
36th Ward Alderman Gilbert Villegas recently held a public safety meeting with the 12th Police District Commander. He reports residents have started a petition for the city to reopen the shuttered 13th District that closed in 2012 due to consolidation.
Now, I give credit to the residents of this area. They're talking about defund the police efforts, where they consolidated this police precinct into another one, and they no longer send officers to patrol this area. And shockingly, something that we've known since the Kansas City experiment, that removing officers from an area actually will lead criminals to act more criminal in that area, and surging officers in a specific area, increasing patrols, can drive down crime. Who would have guessed that criminals are less likely to commit crimes when police are directly nearby, deterring them from committing crimes? I'm glad the people in this area realize this, but of course, the likelihood of this common sense solution actually being instituted, very low. On top of that, Chicago, like many police departments in this country, is dealing with recruiting problems, early retirement, and all of these things driving the spike in crime. Now look, the crime in Chicago is so out of control that even covering crime in Chicago can get you robbed in the city of Chicago. It was recently reported that a TV news crew was robbed at gunpoint while reporting on these robberies. It was a Univision crew, and they, at 5 in the morning in the Wicker Park neighborhood, were reporting about this, about to set up their live shot, when a black SUV and a gray sedan pulled up. They pointed guns in their faces, stole some camera equipment, some personal items like a photographer's backpack, and a bunch of other stuff. Now, apparently, this is the second robbery of a local news crew reporting on robberies this month. Now, I will also add that based on the crime spree that we've covered throughout this, and based on the fact that Univision specifically was being targeted, that it seems like this Latino neighborhood, because you heard the mechanic that didn't speak to the news crew in English at all, he spoke Spanish, seems to be a hotbed since the closing of the precinct that typically patrolled this area. So for whatever reason, the decision has been made. The criminals have decided that this specific Latino area is a good prime target in order to go after, and we're seeing the results each and every day. We're seeing the results even with the Univision news crew, and it's absolute madness. You have to fight back against these criminals. You have to target them. You have to actually enforce the laws. I know that sounds crazy in the United States of America today, but trust me, if you actually arrest the criminals and stop them from committing crimes, they will stop committing crimes. But hey, those are just my thoughts, so let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the insanity in Chicago. Till next time.